Hello, everyone. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, but you couldn't prove it? What if a stranger followed you home without you even knowing? Or worse, what if the danger already inside? Tonight, we bring you three chilling true stories that might make you think twice before stopping for gas, helping a stranger, or even using a public restroom. These aren't just stories. These are real experiences, and they happened when the world was asleep and the shadows had no witnesses. So grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and ask yourself, what would you have done? After breaking up with my boyfriend, I had no choice but to move back in with my parents. We had shared an apartment in downtown Chicago, a mistake I'll never make again. Word of advice: never sign a lease with someone you barely know. He turned out to be someone I didn't even recognize by the end. Now, I was back in Willow Creek, Missouri, a sleepy little town where the loudest noise at night was the wind scraping through the trees. I'm not exactly a small town girl. I love the buzz of the city, the lights, the chaos. But here felt dead. I picked up my old job at the local urgent care clinic. The night shift, quiet, isolated, endless hours of fluorescent lights and silence. Still, nothing felt quite right being back. There was this strange weight in the air, like the kind you feel just before a storm. I didn't know it yet, but something was coming. It was 4:03 a.m. when my shift finally ended. The roads were empty, dark, and lifeless, just the way they always were in Willow Creek. I was starving, and thankfully, Sunrise Bagels had just opened for the day. I grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad to take homey version of dinner, or maybe breakfast, depending on how you look at it when you live upside down. On my way home, I remembered I was nearly out of gas. There's only one 24-hour station near our place, a Shell station right off the highway. Big, empty parking lot, flickering lights. Not a soul in sight. I pulled in, parked at pump 3, and went inside to pay cash. When I came back out, something had changed. Another Cara beat-up blue sedan had pulled into the pump across from me. I hadn't heard it arrive. And that made my stomach twist. As I began pumping gas, I noticed the driver of the blue sedan step out. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with a scruffy beard and an oddly stiff walk. He didn't look dangerous at first, but something about him felt off. Then he walked toward my side of the pump with a smirk. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked, unprompted. My skin crawled. Everything in me screamed to ignore him, but I forced a smile and replied, Sure?" He started doing that old trick where you pretend to pull your thumb off with your other hand. Over and over. His eyes flicked between his fingers and my face, waiting for a reaction. I gave a forced laugh, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. Even after I turned away, he kept doing it slowly, deliberately, as if mocking me. I stared at the nozzle, begging for that satisfying click to signal my tank was full. When it finally came, I practically yanked the nozzle free and darted inside to grab my change. But when I came back out, he was gone. His car, however, was still there and the gas pump was still running. That gut feeling returned stronger now. Something was wrong. I drove home with one hand tight on the steering wheel, the other clutching my takeout bag. The entire ride, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, but no headlights. Nothing. Just black, empty road. 5 minutes later, I pulled into our driveway. My parents were still asleep, so I quietly grabbed the spare key from under the flower pot, unlocked the door, then tucked the key right back where it belonged. I relocked the door, turned off the lights, and tiptoed into the kitchen. The house was silent. Still. Safe. I sat down and unwrapped my sandwich, finally letting myself breathe. Just as I took the first bite, I heard it. Click. The front door unlocked. I froze mid-chew, heart thudding in my ears. Then came the sound of the door opening and gently closing again. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Mom? Dad?" No reply. I crept toward the front foyer, empty. The door was shut, locked, just like I left it. Panic crawled through my chest. With trembling hands, I bolted upstairs and flung open my parents' door. They both shot upright, startled but very much asleep seconds before. Someone else had just entered the house, and they weren't supposed to be here. My dad, half awake but instantly alert, threw on a shirt and headed downstairs without hesitation. I followed closely, heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. My mom trailed behind us, clutching her robe tightly. We flicked on every light, checked every room, kitchen, living room, hallway, nothing. Then Dad stepped outside to check the flower pot. The spare key was gone. My mom gasped. "You didn't check your surroundings before putting it back?" Her voice trembled with fear, not anger. But the guilt hit me like a punch to the chest. Dad continued to sweep bedrooms, closets, garage. When he checked my brother's old room and left the light on, I stayed behind. Something didn't sit right with me. He looked, but maybe not closely enough. I got down on my knees and peered under the bed. Empty. Then I turned toward the dining room, something pulling me there. The table. I crouched and slowly leaned down to peek beneath it. And there he was. The man from the gas station, curled up like an animal, eyes wide, staring back at me. I screamed, loud. My mom screamed too. Dad came thundering back up the stairs, fury in his eyes. He lunged at the intruder, and the two collided, an old man against someone half his age. My mom and I joined in, hitting, kicking, doing whatever we could. Only when he realized we weren't giving up did the man break free and run out the front door. But he still had the key. We called the police the moment the door slammed shut behind him. Thankfully, they arrived within minutes. One cruiser stayed parked in our driveway. The rest of the night, its silent presence. A thin blanket of comfort none of us could fully wrap around. But sleep? It didn't come. My dad dragged a heavy dining chair and wedged it beneath the doorknob. Then he laid down on the couch, still in his jeans, arms crossed like he was guarding a vault. My mom and I stayed in the living room with him, eyes darting to every window whenever a tree branch scratched the siding. We didn't know where that man had gone, but we did know this. He still had our key. By sunrise, my dad was already outside, tools in hand. He changed the lock before anyone even brewed coffee. And with that, our days of hiding a key under a flower pot were officially over. I couldn't shake the guilt. I was the one who brought him here. I was the one who used that spare key carelessly, thoughtlessly. But what haunted me most wasn't the break-in. It was the realization that he had followed me. No headlights, no sound, just waiting, watching. I don't live in fear now, but I lock every door twice. I check every mirror. And I never, ever leave keys outside. Willow Creek may be quiet, but that night, it reminded me of something I'll never forget. Silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it just means the danger is already inside. I always preferred driving at night. No traffic, no distractions, just me, the road, and the low hum of the engine. After working back-to-back shifts all week, I was finally heading down to Jacksonville to visit my younger brother. It was a long haul from Long Beach, New York, around 18 hours, but I left at 2 a.m., sharp to beat the early morning rush. The roads were silent, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but hollow, empty. The kind that makes you check your mirrors a little more often than usual. I stopped at a Dunkin' for a strong coffee, then merged onto the I-95 and began cruising south. Everything felt calm, but too calm. Even the moon looked washed out of the clouds. It wasn't just the darkness outside that felt heavy. Something in the air was off. Like the trip wasn't supposed to happen. Like I was heading towards something I couldn't come back from. By the time I crossed into southern New Jersey, the coffee had worn off and hunger crept in. It was close to 4 a.m., and I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. That's when I saw a highway sign. Wendy's, 1M aisle. I took the exit, winding through a desolate stretch of road lined with trees and industrial silence. No streetlights, just the glare of my high beams cutting through the dark. I pulled into the Wendy's lot. A single car sat parked in the far corner, barely visible. The drive-through menu was lit up, so I assumed they were open. I waited at the speaker for a full minute. No voice. No greeting. I whispered, "Hello?" into the static. Nothing. Curious, I pulled out my phone. Closed. Opens at 6 a.m. Then, 3 knocks on my window. Hard. I flinched. A man stood there, grinning through the glass like he'd been watching me the entire time. I cracked the window just enough to hear him. He leaned in slightly and said, "Hey, sorry. Place doesn't open till 6. I tried too." I nodded. "Yeah, just figured that out." Then, with that same grin never fading, he added, "Actually, I could really use your help. My car died over there. Battery's dead. You got jumper cables?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no, but before I could answer, he pointed back at his car, the one I'd barely noticed in the shadows. "I've got cables. I just need another car to jump it." There was a pause. The kind that feels a little too long to be natural. "I'd really appreciate it, man," he added. I looked at the lot. Empty. Silent. We were the only two out here. I believed in karma. I'd been helped before more than once. So I gave a slow nod. "All right, let's do it." He stepped back, motioning for me to pull up next to his car. I turned my wheel and aligned our hoods as close as I could, heart beating just a little faster than before. Something about his eyes. It felt like he wasn't just waiting for help. He was expecting me. We popped our hoods. The man handed me his jumper cable scoop, frayed along the edges. I connected the clamps to my battery while he moved to his. Everything seemed normal, except for the way he kept glancing around the lot. Quick flicks of his eyes, like he was waiting for something. "Try it now," I told him. He nodded, slid into his driver's seat, and twisted the key. Nothing. He got out slowly. "Let's give it another minute," he said. "Haven't used the car in a while." He pulled out his phone and turned away from me, speaking in rapid Spanish, low and urgent. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but every now and then, he glanced back at me. My gut twisted. This didn't feel right. When he hung up, he smiled and said, "My friend said give it one more try. A few more minutes." I forced a chuckle, pretending I wasn't on edge. Sure. But every part of me was screaming now. The night was too still, the shadows around the building too thick. And that smile, it had changed. It was no longer friendly. It was waiting. It happened in seconds. From opposite ends of the building, 2 pickup trucks came roaring into the parking lot, headlights off until the last possible moment. Tires screeched as they boxed me in, one behind my car, the other to my left. My breath caught in my throat. The man I'd been helping just stood there, watching me with that same twisted grin. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just watched. I didn't wait to ask questions. I ripped the jumper cables off my battery, slammed the hood shut, locked the car with my key fob, and ran. Straight into the woods behind the Wendy's. Branches slashed my arms and legs. I could hear shouting behind me, Spanish voices, angry and chaotic. I didn't stop to look back. I dove behind a fallen log and flattened myself to the dirt, barely breathing. "Try it now," I told him. He nodded, slid into his driver's seat, and twisted the key. Nothing. He got out slowly. "Let's give it another minute," he said. "Haven't used the car in a while." He pulled out his phone and turned away from me, speaking in rapid Spanish, low and urgent. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but every now and then, he glanced back at me. My gut twisted. This didn't feel right. When he hung up, he smiled and said, "My friend said give it one more try. A few more minutes." I forced a chuckle, pretending I wasn't on edge. Sure. But every part of me was screaming now. The night was too still, the shadows around the building too thick. And that smile? It had changed. It was no longer friendly. It was waiting. It happened in seconds. From opposite ends of the building, 2 pickup trucks came roaring into the parking lot, headlights off until the last possible moment. Tires screeched as they boxed me in, one behind my car, the other to my left. My breath caught in my throat. The man I'd been helping just stood there, watching me with that same twisted grin. He didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just watched. I didn't wait to ask questions. I ripped the jumper cables off my battery, slammed the hood shut, locked the car with my key fob, and ran. Straight into the woods behind the Wendy's. Branches slashed my arms and legs. I could hear shouting behind me, Spanish voices, angry and chaotic. I didn't stop to look back. I dove behind a fallen log and flattened myself to the dirt, barely breathing. Footsteps crunched through the brush. I could hear them splitting up, calling to each other, searching. The sound of them crashing through the woods felt like it was coming from all directions. I curled tighter, trying to make myself disappear. Then silence. The footsteps faded. The yelling stopped. All I could hear was the blood thudding in my ears, and the faint beep of my car alarm back at the lot. My heart sank. They'd broken in, and I knew everything I brought for the trip was gone. By the time I made it back to the parking lot, the 3 vehicles were gone. No trace. Just my car, sitting there, alone, violated. The back window had been shattered. My suitcase gone. All my clothes, my shoes, my watch, toiletries, everything I packed for the trip had vanished. They even took the half-empty bag of trail mix on the passenger seat. I just stood there, staring into the mess. Not angry, not even scared anymore. Just hollow. I called 911 with shaking fingers. When officers arrived, they took my statement and scanned the lot for cameras. But Wendy's wouldn't open for another hour. Later, they told me the sedan had a fake license plate. And the trucks? No plates at all. Whoever they were, one officer said, they've done this before. I nodded numbly. Of course they had. And I had walked right into it. The drive home was the longest 2 hours of my life. No music. No coffee. Just the dull hum of the tires and the sinking weight in my chest. He was waiting outside my stall, twice. I've always liked night drives. Less traffic, fewer distractions, just me, the open road, and a playlist that keeps me awake. That night, I was heading from Charlotte to Columbus for a job interview I'd been waiting months for. It was almost 2 a.m. I'd already been driving for 5 hours, and the interstate had turned into a long, endless ribbon of silence. No headlights behind me, no taillights ahead. Just darkness stretching in every direction. There's something unsettling about driving alone at that hour. You begin to notice things show. The trees seem to lean closer. How your own reflection in the window looks like a stranger. The farther I drove, the more I realized how isolated I really was. It wasn't fear exactly, but something about that stretch of highway made me feel like I wasn't completely alone, like someone, or something, was watching me from just beyond the reach of my headlights. Around 2:30 a.m., the coffee I drank hours earlier had long worn off, and my bladder made it clear I wasn't going to make it to Columbus without a stop. I spotted a faded blue sign. Rest area. 1 mile. It looked like one of those tiny, forgotten ones, just a single building surrounded by trees, tucked off the interstate like some relic from the 80s. There were no trucks, no lights, except for one flickering above the restroom door. One car sat parked near the tree-lined windows, tinted so dark I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. The air was thick with dew and silence as I stepped out of my car. I walked toward the restroom, each step crunching softly against gravel. When I pushed the door open, the first thing I saw stopped me cold. A man was standing in the far corner of the bathroom, facing the wall, completely still. At first, I thought maybe he was drunk, or lost, or just weird. He stood perfectly still in the far corner, not facing the urinals or the sinks, just the wall. His head was bowed slightly, arms limp at his sides, like he was being punished in timeout. I hesitated. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to engage. So I kept my eyes down, stepped quickly past him, and slipped into one of the stalls. But I couldn't go. Not a single drop. The room was dead silent. No movement. No sound. Just the buzz of a dying fluorescent light and my own racing heartbeat. I gave it a minute, flushed anyway to fake it, and stepped back out. And that's when I saw him. He had turned, now facing me. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. And his face. His skin looked pale, almost waxy. His eyes were wide and glassy, unblinking. Like he wasn't looking at me, but through me. I broke eye contact and walked out as calmly as I could. But when I reached my car and looked in the rearview mirror, he was coming out of the restroom, walking straight toward me. I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse, backed out so fast my tires kicked up gravel, and peeled back onto the highway. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry, but I told myself, he's just a creep, nothing more. The farther I drove, the more that exit started to feel like a lie. But then pressure, fast and sharp. I hadn't actually gone back in the first stop, and now my bladder was screaming. Another blue sign, rest area, 3 miles. I didn't want to stop again. Every bone in my body told me not to, but I had no choice. This one was identical to the last small, dark, empty. I parked directly in front of the building. No cars, no movement. I took a deep breath, stepped inside, and went straight into a stall. This time, I locked the door. But the moment I sat down, I heard footsteps. The footsteps were slow, heavy, one after another, echoing against the cold tiles like they had nowhere else to go but straight to me. They didn't stop at the sinks, didn't pause at the urinals. They came directly to my stall and stopped inches from the door. My breath caught. I stared at the floor, heart pounding in my ears. That's when I saw them. The shoes. Same scuffed black boots. Same loose, gray pants brushing over them. The exact same pair I saw at the first rest stop. My blood ran cold. He had followed me. Across miles of empty road. He had followed me here. I wanted to scream, to kick the door open and run, but I froze. Seconds passed, then more. Finally, I mustered the courage to speak. "Someone's in here," I said, voice strained and cracking. No response. No movement. He just stood there. I could hear my own heartbeat now. My hands hovered over my phone. I unlocked it with shaking fingers and pulled up the dial screen. If he was going to hurt me, I wasn't going to wait quietly. I hit 9 to 1 -1 and turned on speaker. The operator's voice broke the silence like a gunshot. 911? What's your emergency? I answered loud and clear. I'm at a rest stop on I-77. There's a man outside my stall. I think he's following me. Still no sound from the other side of the door. I kept the speaker on. My voice steady but loud enough for him to hear every word. Please send someone now. He's right outside. Seconds stretched into eternity. I stared at the boots, willing them to move, begging them to disappear. And then, they turned. He walked away. Slowly. No rush. Like he wanted me to know he wasn't afraid. I whispered to the dispatcher. He's leaving. I've got officers en route, she said. Stay in the stall. Don't move. I didn't. I just sat there, shaking. Not because I was hiding, but because I finally realized I was being hunted. A knock on the restroom door nearly made me jump out of my skin. State police, you can come out now. I unlocked the stall slowly, cautiously peeking out. The restroom was empty. Completely empty. I described the man to the officers in detail, from his boots to his stare. They swept the area, even checked the nearby woods, but found nothing. No vehicle, no footprints, no cameras. Could have been passing through, one of them said, trying to sound reassuring. But I wasn't reassured. They offered to escort me back to the highway. I didn't say no, because deep down, I knew he wasn't done. I made it to Columbus the next day, but I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. Even now. Weeks later, I double-check every lock, every shadow, every stall. I used to think rest stops were harmless. That being a man somehow made me less vulnerable. But that night shattered that illusion. He never said a word. Never made a move. But somehow, that was worse. He watched. He followed. And he waited. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what someone does. It's what they don't do. And somewhere out there, I think he's still watching. So, Have you ever had an encounter that made your skin crawl? Maybe someone followed you, or something just felt off. If you've ever experienced anything even remotely like these stories, or if you know a story that deserves to be told, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more chilling true stories like these, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and trust your instincts. Because sometimes, they're the only thing standing between you and something you'll never forget.